Hey everybody, welcome back to a reading about the presidents. Today we are going to do 3 presidents. We're going to do Harry S. Truman first. Harry S. Truman was born on May 8th, 1884 in Lamar, Missouri. And he died the day after Christmas, 1972 in Kansas City, Missouri. He's given the nickname, "Give 'em Hell, Harry." He was a Baptist. He went to the University of Missouri at Kansas City Law School, but did not graduate. He was a farmer and a businessman. He served with Missouri National Guard for 6 years. World War I, rejoined the National Guard in May 1917, which was absorbed into the U.S. Army. Served with the 129th Field Artillery. Entered as a lieutenant, promoted to captain, commanded Battery D. He stayed in the U.S. Army's Officer Reserve Corps and commanded an artillery regiment as a full colonel in the 30s. His father was John Anderson Truman, who died in 1914. His mother was Martha Ellen Young Truman, who died in 1947. His wife was Elizabeth Bess Wallace Truman, who passed away in 1982. Wow, that's a long life. Children, only one child, Margaret, who passed away in 2008. Margaret Truman passed away in 2008. Political life for President Truman was Jackson County, Missouri judge, administrative position for 2 years. Jackson County presiding judge, chief county executive for, 36 would be 8 years. U.S. Senator for 10 years. Vice President for 3 months. And then he became president. President Truman served 2 terms, April 12th, 1945 to January 20th, 1953. And last time we did this, we read about when I think it was during Delano's time, Roosevelt's time, that the date for the inauguration was moved from April to January, which I think was a smart move. I think Congress made the right decision on that. Truman took office upon the death of President Roosevelt. Mr. Truman was a Democrat. His vice president was Alben Barkley until 1953. In the election of 1948, Mr. Truman got 303 electoral votes. Thomas Dewey got 189. And Strom Thurmond, we've heard of him, only 39 electoral votes. Mr. Truman got 24,179,347 of the popular vote. Mr. Dewey got 21,991,292 popular votes. And Mr. Thurmond got 1 million, ooh, that's bad, 1,175,930. Ooh. From go to the 20s, low 20s to 1 million, low 20 millions to 1 million. Ouch. The cabinet for Mr. Truman. For Secretary of State, he had James Bynes, George C. Marshall, and then Dean Acheson. For Secretary of the Treasury, Frederick Vinson, replaced by John W. Snyder. For Secretary of War, Robert P. Patterson. Followed by Kenneth C. Royal. And when Royal came in, it became the Department of Defense. Sometime between July and September 1947. For Secretary of Defense, so Secretary of War was integrated into the new Department of Defense. So Department of Defense Minister was James V. Forrestal, followed by Lewis A. Johnson, followed by George C. Marshall, followed by Robert A. Lovett. Attorney General was John C. Clark, followed by J. Howard McGrath, followed by James B. McGranary. Secretary of the Navy, which became part of this Department of Defense, James Forrestal. Postmaster General was Robert E. Hannigan, followed by Jesse M. Donaldson. Secretary of the Interior was Harold L. Ikes, followed by Julius Krug, K-R-U-G, Krug, followed by Oscar L. Chapman. Secretary of Agriculture was Clinton P. Anderson, followed by Charles F. Brannan. Secretary of Commerce, Henry A. Wallace, followed by W. Averill Harriman, followed by Charles Sawyer. And then lastly, Secretary of Labor, Louis B. Zwellenbach, followed by Maurice Tobin. Supreme Court appointments for Mr. Truman included Harold B. H. Burton, Frederick M. Vinson, Thomas C. Clark, and Sherman Minton. For the State of the Union, the population of the U.S. in 1945 was 151,325,798. National debt in 1953 was $275,168,120,129. President's salary in 1948, $100K a year. That's a lot of money. $100K a year. Truman met his future wife in Sunday school when they were children. Oh, so nice. So nice. Post-war United States. The GI Bill passed in 1944 and greatly helped returning veterans go to college and buy homes. The post-war baby boom created a great need for housing in places like Levittown, New York, sprang up, and places like Levittown, New York, sprang up with look-alike houses. Pent-up demand for consumer goods now could be unleashed, and so people bought cars, appliances, televisions, clothing, and food. And inflation rose. Another major problem for the post-war economy was finding jobs for the more than 20 million who were returning from serving in the war or working in defense plants. Conflicts arose between ethnic or racial groups for jobs, and some women resented having to give up working outside of the home. Soon, the sales-at-home industry blossomed, so housewives could remain homebound but earn extra spending cash at the same time. Did we know Mr. Truman, President Truman, once boarded in Kansas City with Arthur Eisenhower, Dwight's older brother? Founding of the United Nations, 1945. One of Truman's first actions as president was to insist that the United Nations Conference on International Organization in San Francisco proceed as scheduled. Its purpose was to charter a new international organization that would prevent any world wars in the future. The United States proposed to take a leading role, rather than isolate itself as it had done by refusing to join the League of Nations. President Truman attended the final session of the conference in June 1945 and then urged the Senate to approve the charter without delay. They overwhelmingly voted in favor of joining the United Nations in July 1945. As the Cold War unfolded, the UN found itself cast between its two superpowers in various parts of the globe. Many of its early issues were shared with Truman while he was president, including the creation of Israel and the Korean War, the state of Israel. and the Korean War. The visit to Mexico, March 1947. Truman became the first American president to make a state visit to Mexico and received a warm reception by his gesture the day after his arrival made him a hero among the Mexican people. Although not on his itinerary, Truman decided to visit the Chapultepec Castle, the site of fighting during the Mexican War, where Americans led by George Pickett stormed the heights, and where legend says 6 Mexican military cadets committed suicide rather than surrender to the Americans. Truman laid a wreath at the memorial for Los Niños heroes, and bowed his head in respect to their sacrifice. Word rapidly spread through the city, and newspaper headlines proclaimed the beginning of a new era of friendship between the two neighbors, started by the simple act of an American president. Berlin Airlift, June 26, 1948 to May 12, 1949. At the end of World War II, the Allies split Germany into 4 occupation zones: Soviet, American, British, and French. Berlin was deep in the Soviet zone, but split between East and West. Dismayed by the presence of the Allies in the Russian sector, the Soviets decided to take action to push out their unwelcome visitors. So in June 22, 1948, Soviets stopped all ground traffic to Berlin and figured that without necessities, West Berlin would soon succumb and join the rest of the communist East Germany. The Allies, however, were not willing to passively accept this act of aggression. On June 26, 1948, the first plane flew into West Berlin, starting an Allied airlift, which lasted the next 11 months and included more than 270,000 missions. Truman approved this action as essential to proving not only to Germany and the Soviet Union, but the rest of the world that the communist threat would not be ignored. Did we know Truman's eyesight was so poor he memorized the eye chart for the Army entrance exam? I don't know if that's cheating to memorize that, but Senator Truman was named one of the 10 best-dressed senators. George Washington, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, James K. Polk, James Buchanan, Andrew Johnson, James Garfield, William McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, Warren G. Harding, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Harry S. Truman, LBJ, and Gerald Ford were all Masons. Did we know that Truman was the first president to have a television in the White House? And that's Mr. Truman for you.